so often.
One-sided news stories plaguing our country. This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
You seem to think the program is one of censorship.
They don't moderate and monitor the content. We lose total control.
I said we're going to war with Iraq. Why? He said, I don't know. Take the fact that develops weapons of mass destruction very seriously. Do you actually believe that public opinion influences the government? Is there a deep state? Yes. Can we fire these people? No. Starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran.
I want the Iranians to know that if I'm the president, we will attack Iran.
Well, I actually agree with that. CFF's the island. It's our responsibility as rulers.
That was quite a show, wasn't it?
In the last few years, it has become virtually impossible to discuss video games as an art form without somebody mentioning Metal Gear Solid 2: Sons of Liberty.
What are you talking about?
Above all the other games in the series, this one has probably been the subject of the most critical analysis with respect to its themes and storytelling. You might have heard somebody say that everyone hated this game when it came out, but really that was only ever a half-truth at best. As a matter of fact, the game was actually quite highly celebrated. As an early PlayStation 2 game released in 2001, it was a phenomenal technical accomplishment. Even just at the extremely superficial level of graphics and audio, the game was beyond exceptional, but it was also celebrated for its gameplay, which was extremely forward-looking. Yes, there was definitely backlash. If there was anything about the game that was controversial, it was definitely the story. Everybody knows by now about the bait and switch with the protagonist swapping out Snake for Raiden. Outside of very elite educated circles, this was not considered a brilliant postmodern commentary on whatever the fuck, but was generally understood as just Kojima and the boys playing a devious little prank on the player just because they thought it'd be funny to betray their fans. For the record, that is a pretty funny trick, but only when Kojima does it. Ironically, the story arguably aged better than the rest of the game to the point that MGS2 is often considered a masterpiece, but its current status was the result of years of re-evaluation, fueled in no small part by the ominously spot-on predictions of how the internet and digital media would affect society in the future, and how the powers that be may attempt to control and regulate it. The game was already considered prescient over a decade ago. Prescient? I don't know. Old heads might remember the proposed online censorship bills SOPA and PIPA, may they rest in piss, and that long predates the phenomenon of generative AI and AI girlfriends that tell you whatever you want to hear and AI-driven fact-checkers. The alarmingly rapid evolution and adoption of these things have only made the game somehow even more relevant in ways that not even Kojima himself was prepared for. If you were following my Christmas marathon, you might have heard my voice being AI translated into extremely broken and horrible sounding Japanese because Google's automated systems decided that's what you wanted. But of course, that's completely inessential. I don't need AI to speak broken and awful sounding Japanese on my behalf. Watashi ni hitsuyou no wa watakushi jishin to Google honyaku dakera. You know what I'm saying, right? No? Well, you may not believe me, but the AI translation wasn't that much better.
Watashi Frank. Shashin Toro Shigoto.
Anyways, time has only vindicated Sons of Liberty and its themes and narrative for better or worse, and by the looks of things, it will only continue to do so. I've wanted to talk about this game for a while now and could never find the right moment, but it occurred to me that as the themes only become more and more pertinent with time, the perfect moment is kind of ethereal and intangible as a concept. It will only continue to become more relevant. There is no time in particular where it will achieve peak relevancy. At the same time, I don't know what the internet and the digital landscape as we know it will look like in the next few years. For all I know, all the world governments, including my own, will collectively pass a bunch of laws to fuck it all beyond recognition if the AIs don't get to it first. Every day I feel like I'm hearing about some new legislation to absolutely destroy regular people's internet access under the guise of keeping us safe. Something that is tragically poetic considering the subject of today's video. That might come up later. But first, let's talk about the fun stuff, like the presentation. A lot of people say Kojima is a genius, but it needs to be said that a lot of his genius comes from surrounding himself with other geniuses, like the people working the art direction and the music. Like most games in the series, the art direction in MGS2 is phenomenal. This is one of the go-to counterexamples whenever people say, "This looks like a PS2 game," derogatory. But it needs to be understood that this was certainly an edge case. Most PS2 games, especially in 2001, with a few exceptions, did not look this good. And yet, despite this, the game runs at 60 FPS somehow. Yes, this footage is from the HD version on PlayStation 3, but texture and model quality are largely unchanged, and the art direction is, for the most part, unalloyed by the passage of time. When a game's art direction is on point like this, the blockier models and lower res textures aren't really a distraction. Everything feels immaculate, like even just this overhead shot when Raiden steps out of the elevator is total eye candy, as is the scene near the end, where you're sniping mines and soldiers with the sunset in the background. It's an absolutely gorgeous set piece for one of the most ball-bustingly infuriating parts of the game. What really impresses me is the animation quality. This is one of the things that I feel most games from this era took the longest time to develop and evolve. I mean, it wasn't that long before this game came out that most 3D games were still using display list actors where every character was a composite of a bunch of independently moving prisms and trapezoids and shit. The animations are not only super smooth and detailed, but also highly expressive, which not only gives you clear reads on enemy behavior, but also makes for a very comical experience a lot of the time. Metal Gear never forgets to be funny and entertaining, even as the game goes to serious places, and when I see a Spetsnaz soldier losing his mind over a 2 kilobyte JPEG of a Playboy model, I'm like, yep, that's just what I thought. This is definitely Metal Gear. Harry Gregson Williams, who composed Shrek, really pushed it over the edge with this game. There are songs in Sons of Liberty that I listen to on a virtually daily basis, and I have looked for any excuse to put them in my videos.
It was nothing. All clear.
I'm also a big fan of the voice acting in this game, even though certain exchanges are rough around the edges with respect to the rhythm of conversation, which I can only assume is a byproduct of localization from the game's native Japanese.
Find something to believe in, and find it for yourself. And when you do, pass it on to the future.
Believe in what?
That's your problem.
There are more than a few lines in the game that are really funny in context, and it's not always clear if it's actually supposed to be funny, but it doesn't always matter if the end result is the same.
There's a terminal in front of the elevator. A node.
Did you say nerd?
Not nerd. Node.
We've managed to avoid drowning.
Good job.
A dud!
President Johnson is your first priority.
Priority my butt.
Jack, I know what you're saying, but Snake is dead. He can't be here, not even as this Dr. Hal Emmerich.
But that also means that he can't be the terrorist leader behind this thing.
I've always said that the tone of Metal Gear is really the thing that makes it so endearing. That the games can pinball between a lecture on the legitimacy of the NATO bombing campaign of Yugoslavia and Otacon talking about his favorite anime is something that just really works for me, and I can't quite put my finger on why. Like, it's difficult to reverse engineer the precise mathematical equations to recreate that balance in another work of art because it just comes so naturally in these games. Then there's the gameplay. Now, the gameplay of MGS2 is one of those things that never ceases to amaze me. The number of little details and nuances in the mechanics rival games coming out today. MGS1 was already very impressive in 1998, where guards would actually notice your footprints or funny little details like how holding Sniper Wolf's handkerchief made the wolves not attack you. I learned that for the first time relatively recently. MGS2 one-upped it in too many ways to count. You can now aim in first person, there's a tranq pistol with a laser sight allowing non-lethal incapacitations, which is such a satisfying thing that every game in the series that came later would bring it back. And even Death Stranding 2 had one. You can hold people up and make them do a little dance. The player's relationship with the environment is also a lot deeper now, where you can hang off of railings and even do 100 pull-ups to upgrade the grip gauge. That's a free tip. Use it. It's also a very replayable game where you'll learn something new every time you come back to it, like how you can actually damage Vamp's stamina bar by shooting the pillar with a grenade launcher while he's underwater. I don't know why that works, but I'm glad that it does. Also, when you hold up the guards, they give you dog tags, and if you collect enough of them at the end of a playthrough, you get a fun bonus item to help you out on your next one. But the thing that really makes the gameplay shine is how much it does to sell the world. The thing about making game worlds believable is that it's not just a matter of audio visuals, but also the reactivity of the world. If you shoot this television screen, it goes black with the broken pixels spreading out from the point of contact. Every individual drink bottle and glass can be shattered, and you can even shoot the individual pieces to break them more. There's a container of ice cubes, and if you shoot it, they all move independently of one another, and you can watch them melt in real time. Look at this bathroom mirror. You can shoot it and the whole thing cracks, but you can still see a shattered reflection inside, and you can keep shooting it to break off individual bits of glass, and you can leave, come back an hour later, and it's still broken. This game is almost 25 years old. How come you don't do that, Cyberpunk? And one of my favorite stupid things you can do is kick one of the Marine guards in the final area of the tanker chapter, which causes him to go flying into another guard, which starts a chain reaction of all the guards bumping into each other and sending everyone flying, creating so much chaos that the entire game starts lagging. I could do this for hours. Gabe Newell famously made a big deal in the documentary on Half-Life 1's development about how fun in video games really comes down to reactivity. How the world acknowledges the player. So it should come as no surprise that Kojima cited Half-Life 1 as an inspiration. That game released the same year as MGS1, and Kojima had played it shortly after its release and was apparently blown away, possibly to the point of jealousy, by how detailed and reactive the world was, and can be quoted in the developer diary of MGS2 as saying, "Once again, I felt that sense of, we've been outdone by the Americans." And this is why MGS2 lets you shoot a drink and watch the ice cubes melt in real time. But let's talk about the controls. Now, you might have heard people say that the older Metal Gear games have weird controls, and some particularly feisty gamers might even tell you that the controls are bad, straight up. When I first played these games 700 years ago, I was definitely one of those people. That is until I tried to play the original Splinter Cell. This game came out after Sons of Liberty, but if I didn't know that beforehand, I would have guessed that it came out before. I'm sorry to all the Toms and Clancys in the audience, but I cannot play this shit, and you cannot make me. Even though I've come around to the older Metal Gear's controls a lot more in recent years, there are still areas where I find it to be not so great. The thing about MGS2's controls is that they can be very sensitive and extremely committal. In tight moments requiring clutch maneuvers, it isn't just that it can be very hard to do what you want to do, but it's also incredibly easy to do something that you definitely do not want to do. You have to be very intentional with your inputs to a degree that you can mostly get used to during normal gameplay, but in certain contexts it can be an absolute nightmare. On extreme difficulty, a lot of these issues are launched to the forefront. In particular, there are boss fights where you have to do shit fast, which can be very difficult to square with the game's systems, and sometimes the only way to beat them without having a stroke is to use tricks. The boss fight with the Harrier is a great example. There are attacks that this thing does that I am convinced can only be consistently dodged by abusing the iframes and the flipping over the railing animation. So you have to press against the railing by making sure you're pushing the stick at a very specific angle that the game will recognize that that's what you're trying to do, which can be tricky to do relative to the camera angle, which is fixed in an orientation that's not quite 45 degrees, and then push it for exactly some number of frames before Raiden will actually flatten. Then you have the assault rifles. Now, the PS2 had this great feature called pressure sensitivity, where the controller would actually be able to tell how hard you were pushing a button and could use that to deepen gameplay systems. There were a number of potentially great use cases for this, but despite what I can only assume were noble intentions, Metal Gear has possibly the most atrocious use case. To hold up your rifle to perform a hold up of an enemy, you have to gently hold square, and to fire the gun, you have to press it firmly. These two actions have very different consequences, and it's way too easy to do a misinput and start firing. In the main game, you can mostly avoid this altogether because you don't have to use an assault rifle for anything outside of this one part where you have to disguise yourself. But the final round of VR missions actually forces you to use a rifle to hold up enemies. They saved these ones for last because they knew how fucking terrible it was. Most of the VR missions are already spectacularly punishing by the end, but marrying that to this pressure-sensitive bullshit pushes it into a whole new category of fuck. By some miracle, I did actually beat these missions because I had to get the Platinum Trophy, but the harder the VR missions got, the more the control scheme started to feel dated. Later re-releases found smarter ways of doing this as pressure sensitivity was left on the shelf, but I didn't feel like buying the game again, so I was stuck doing it the old-fashioned way. You see, I used to say these games were inconsistent, but that wasn't really true. As a sum of parts, a game is a computer program, and just by the nature of what it is generally not capable of being inconsistent. Even when something appears inconsistent, there are consistent principles and protocols underneath that allowed the apparent inconsistency to happen. The truth is, it's me, the player, who is being inconsistent, because humans don't have the ability to remain that consistent the way computers do. Most of us are not Shaolin monks or kung fu masters. Our stupid, gelatinous, weak bodies and our fucking stupid monkey brains aren't capable of reproducing ultra-sensitive actions down to a T. And the thing about older games is that they aren't always designed in a way that seems particularly conscious of that. And so they end up creating situations where it's way too easy to do the wrong shit. I actually believe things like this are the reason games are so frictionless nowadays. Most people developing games today grew up playing games like this, and probably have memories of getting their dicks blown off 15 times in a row, and they never want anyone else to experience that again. But I feel like there's gotta be some kind of middle ground, you know? Just make the game work, and let me win once in a while, you know what I'm saying? As a game overall, MGS2 is pretty damn good. Not perfect, but certainly better than MGS1. And Splinter Cell. And with that fun stuff out of the way, let's talk about the story. Like most of Kojima's games, it is very plot-driven, but the characters that drive that plot are bigger than life, literally. The way the Kojima-verse works is that if your name is Fat Man, it's not because you're a fat man, but it's because you're obsessed with bombs, such as the Fat Man, which was dropped on Nagasaki. And if your name is Vamp, it's not because you're a vampire, it's because you're bisexual. And if your name is Die Hard Man, it's because your birth name is John McClane, which is the name of the protagonist from Die Hard. And if your name is Ross Clotman, it's because you're a Jamaican student at Hogwarts. Fat Man is one of my favorite bosses in any video game, and even just one of my favorite video game characters in general.
So that I can become the emperor among detonation devotees.
You're nothing but a common criminal, and that's the only way people will ever remember you.
How dare you! I'm an artist!
He's just a big drunken buffoon laughing his ass off, rolling around on roller skates, planting bombs around an arena that looks suspiciously like Bomberman. You can tell the voice actor was having a blast. Then you have Vamp, also known as Gay Straight Man. What's his deal? Well, he's a vampire who does these little spinny dances while throwing knives at you, and he has a big combat knife strapped to his penis. Did I mention this is a Kojima production? Fortune will one-shot you with a railgun while begging you to kill her, which takes 2 shots because her heart was actually on the right side of her body the whole time. What the fuck? Olga Gurlukovich, I really liked her, and then you have Revolver Ocelot, who is now possessed by Liquid's severed arm, and if that sounds stupid, don't worry, because he isn't actually possessed by Liquid's arm, he just used hypnotherapy to convince himself that he was possessed by the arm, but we're not talking about that right now. I won't give you the full detailed play-by-play of the plot this time, so here's the SparkNotes version. In the year 2007, Snake sneaks onto a tanker to get photographic evidence of a new Metal Gear model after co-founding an anti-Metal Gear organization with Otacon. But upon uploading the photographs, Revolver Ocelot shows up to steal Ray and sink the tanker along with Snake and the Marines. 2 years later, Colonel Campbell of Foxhound, remember him, orders a new operative, Raiden, to infiltrate the Big Shell cleanup facility to rescue the president. While he's there, he meets Iroquois Pliskin, a member of the SEAL team that was sent as a diversion, who is obviously Snake, but Raiden doesn't know that, until it's revealed in the middle of a fight with Solidus Snake, the leader of the Dead Cell organization that kidnapped the president.
No! That is not Solid Snake!
Raiden contacts the president, who immediately grabs him by the pussy, and he explains that the president of the United States doesn't actually have any real power, and is just a public face who exists for no other reason than to advance the agenda of the Patriots, who are a secret group of unknown members who rule the country from the shadows. The entire democratic process is therefore just an elaborate drama to give people the illusion of choice. Furthermore, the purpose of the Big Shell is not at all to clean up an oil spill, but is really to conceal Arsenal Gear, which is a mobile fortress housing an all-powerful AI system that controls/monitors digital information on a mass scale. Raiden pushes onward to rescue Emma Emmerich, Otacon's estranged sister, who wrote a program to destroy the GW AI. Vamp stabs her and she succumbs to her wounds shortly after uploading the virus. Snake seemingly betrays Raiden, but it was a ruse so he could gain access to Arsenal. Solidus reminds Raiden of his past as a child soldier in the Liberian Civil War, and Olga Gurlukovich sets him free. At which point Campbell starts calling Raiden and going apeshit.
Your role, that is, mission, is to infiltrate the structure and disarm the terrorists.
My role? Why do you keep saying that?
Turn the game console off right now. I need scissors. 61. Infiltrate the enemy fortress. Outer Heaven. An anemone or clematis plant's juice can cause a rash.
Raiden meets Snake, who gives him his clothes back, and after fighting through 7 billion soldiers with your bestest buddy Solid Snake, Otacon discovers that the colonel you've been talking to for the entire game is not a person at all, and is in fact an AI construct molded out of Raiden's own expectations as per the information in his neurological implants. After shooting through 3 billion more soldiers and 20 Metal Gear Rays in a mind-melting sequence where you can barely even tell what's diegetic anymore, Revolver Ocelot escapes in a Metal Gear Ray while Arsenal Gear crashes into Manhattan off-screen because of 9/11. Another AI contacts Raiden, revealing that GW was only one of many AIs who make up the S3 plan, which is an advanced protocol for controlling the flow of digital information on a mass scale, thus controlling human thought and behavior. Raiden's entire mission up to this point was a stress test of the S3 protocol, modeled after the Shadow Moses incident, MGS-1, with the rationale being that if it could solve such an extreme situation, it would be able to handle anything. Solidus tells Raiden that what he wants is to stop the Patriots from taking away everybody's freedoms, and even Raiden himself is conflicted about fighting him, having realized by now just how blindly he had been following the Patriots' orders up to this point. But they have him by the balls because they'll kill Olga's child and Rose if he doesn't comply. So, in the end, he is forced to complete the mission. Now, there's a lot to talk about here, but to start, I just have to say that the timing of this game's release is really eerie. The plot, generically summarized, is that Raiden is given a mission to stop terrorists from causing a destructive oil spill, but really the purpose of the exercise was to test an advanced AI protocol that would allow the Patriots to strengthen their grip on human society and consciousness. So, in other words, this is a game where you have to go on a mission under completely fabricated pretexts, thinking you're fighting for one thing, but really all this time the people giving you the order have completely ulterior motives, advancing their own agenda to acquire more power. This game came out in November 2001, just weeks after 9/11, which served as a pretext not only for a war with a country that had nothing to do with it, but also for the aggressive expansion and enhancement of the surveillance apparatus via the Patriot Act.
So patriotism is your excuse for circumventing the Constitution?
Okay, I'm not saying Kojima predicted 9/11 because that would be stupid, but even though the game came out in the very beginning of the post-9/11 world, and 95% of the game's development time happened before the event, the poetry that was there was definitely not lost on the team, and Kojima himself actually expressed anxiety over the game's release in the wake of the tragedy. But in the end, the game received some minor censorship in its final act out of sensitivities around the event. And there's a little more poetry. After the dust settled, however, the promotional material for the later Snake Eater directly satirized the aggressive yet dubious assertions that Iraq was developing WMDs, which led to the invasion, all in the name of stopping 9/11-2. 9/12, if you will.
The age of deterrence has become the age of control. All in the name of averting catastrophe from weapons of mass destruction.
Now let's talk about AI Campbell and the simulation, as it were. Although it may only become more obvious on subsequent playthroughs, the game is subconsciously priming you for this big twist for the entire runtime. Raiden's VR training is repeatedly referenced while showing you clips from MGS1 and even the tanker chapter of MGS2. It wants you to heavily associate this idea of training the ideal soldier using VR with playing a video game, perhaps even the very one you are playing right now. They even double down on this in MGS4.
Nowadays, anyone with a computer can get combat training. The FPS games that these children love are distributed for free by these companies. Of course, it's all just virtual training. It's so easy for them to get absorbed by these war games. And before they know it, they're in the PMCs holding real guns.
The game is filled with aesthetic parallels to MGS1, but the more you pay attention, the more you begin to realize that the game isn't simply paying homage. The game is, in many ways, exactly MGS1. You swim up to the facility while Colonel Campbell gives you the rundown, the elevator in the back is the only way up, Cyborg Ninja is there, you blow up the control panel for an electrified floor using a Nikita missile launcher, and there's an exact replica of the torture chamber from Shadow Moses. It's also worth noting a detail that was lost in localization, which is that Raiden's original Japanese voice was supposed to sound badass, much closer to Snake's. Japanese players may even be tricked into thinking that it is Snake before he takes off his mask. Even though recreating Solid Snake was not the primary purpose of S3, the Patriots theorized that the protocol was sophisticated enough that it would be able to do so by exploiting his legend to impressionable suckers, and Raiden proved it.
We don't carry guns to take people down. We're not here to help some politician either.
You can say that because you're a legend, a hero.
Legends don't mean a whole lot. I was just a name to exploit.
If they could turn this crybaby loser into Snake, they could turn anybody into anything. The foundation for this was already laid down by Raiden's childhood training using American action films to instill indiscriminate murder as an aspirational pursuit, which, by the way, is a tactic used in real life. Essentially, it's a warning about how escapism and attempting to live vicariously through a badass action hero can set you up to be used and manipulated by malevolent forces. Raiden was selected because he is a confused and damaged loner who turns his back on everything he doesn't like, obsessively escaping into his VR training before being set loose on a suicide mission so he can be just like his hero, Solid Snake. If you're not careful, this could be you. And this ties into one of the recurring themes in Metal Gear, which is agency and lack thereof. Forcing you to kill the boss is a much more powerful story moment when you can go the entire game up to that point without killing a single person. And Phantom Pain's Shining Lights Even in Death mission is possibly even more powerful. The mission begins by giving you a way of telling the infected from the non-infected so you can kill only the ones necessary. But shortly after beginning, it rug pulls you by revealing that everyone is actually infected, so you have to kill them all. Because killing was optional for the rest of the game, I was genuinely hesitant to act on my first playthrough, which is really something. I think MGS2 does this in a much less obvious way. The twist at the end, where your orders are really coming from the Lali Lule Illuminati deep state overlords, makes you feel betrayed and lied to, and Solidus and the rest of Dead Cell are then recontextualized by this a little bit. They're definitely villains, to be clear, and obviously it's a bit naive to think Solidus's motivations are completely selfless, but I wonder if some people would ask if he's the villain or not. I've seen commentary from people playing and revisiting the game today, and they see in Solidus the guy who's trying to get all the unredacted Epstein files released. A truly anti-establishment hero, ousted from power for no other reason than trying to free the people's minds and expose the great fiction that has been fed to the public for decades. It's not hard to imagine getting on board with that, but you don't have a choice in the end. You have to take him down, no matter how conflicted you are about doing so. And this is where we need to appreciate the reason this story works so uniquely well as a video game story. You can watch all the cutscenes back to back as a movie and be somewhat entertained or engaged, but because the rigid structure of the game design aligns so well with the idea of Raiden's complete lack of agency, it just wouldn't have the same effect in any other medium. The simulation is directly analogous to a video game. After all, that is, by some definition, what a video game is. Raiden's exploitation was enabled by an AI construct impersonating his own idea of Colonel Campbell from his favorite game, MGS1. Back in 2001, an AI construct of a human being that was so convincing you wouldn't even notice unless it started losing its mind was science fiction. Nowadays, that happens all the time. There are now people developing actual psychosis over their AI girlfriends who were presumably created in the image of their ideal girlfriend. It's not real and never will be, but some people just really want to believe it so badly, to accept the fiction they provide.
Rose, does she actually exist?
Of course I do, Jack. You have to believe.
Damn!
That's not even to mention AI slop images and videos. While there's still a certain uncanny nature to them that tips off the attentive viewer, there's no guarantee it will stay that way. And that's one of the most unsettling things about generative AI becoming more and more sophisticated. It isn't just that you may believe things that aren't true, but it will erode the trust in the evidence of your eyes and ears to the point that you might suspect anything you can't see face to face could be fake even when it's definitely not. Imagine for a second if a bunch of photos and videos depicting a global human trafficking ring or war crimes were being published online. Now it becomes a lot easier to dismiss it as being fake. Although Kojima denies that the game was about the rise of AI specifically, the ability to so easily fabricate images and audiovisual evidence of whatever you want to be true, or in service of your preferred narrative, still falls under the umbrella of what the game was about. An era of ready-made truths, now with super glossy, uncanny video evidence to go with it. And what about AI translators? Remember when I mentioned YouTube auto-dubbing my Christmas videos in Japanese? How would I have known if it was actually saying in Japanese what I was saying in English, or if the emotional intent behind those words was carried properly? Human-made translations have a long history of misunderstanding emotional intent and context, and even in the case of MGS2 itself, I already mentioned that Raiden sounding like Snake was one of the things that got lost in localization. Considering how challenging it can be for actual humans who, in many cases, do this professionally, to interpret these things between languages, is it really wise to trust an AI model with it? There's been a lot of concern about human translators inserting their own agendas, but is that really a problem that AI would be free of? Back in November, there was actually a tweet originally written in Spanish that Grok, for whatever reason, decided to auto-translate with slurs that were definitely not part of the original text. The funniest thing is that this was actually flagged for hateful conduct. The website literally flagged it for slurs that its own AI added to the original tweet. Most of the responses came from people, as far as I know, who were smart enough to recognize that this was the AI's fault, not the posters. But can we always count on that being the case? Hell, for all I know, the AI system that was dubbing my videos in Japanese was telling you to go back to Zimbabwe. But then again, how do you know that my regular voice isn't AI? I've already had people say some of my scripts sound like AI, which, you know, that's just kinda how I talk. I can show you the Audacity waveforms and all the project files that go into these videos, but Then again, how difficult is it to use AI to make a video of an Audacity waveform, especially as sophisticated as it's gotten? I mean, everyone you have ever watched on the internet, you were never seeing an actual real person, but a digital reconstruction of them made out of encoded digits decoded into a format that can be approximated with pixels and sound vibrations. Earlier this year, Meta patented an AI system that would, in the event of somebody's death, take over the person's account and continue posting as if nothing happened. If I died, what would get in the way of some Google equivalent scraping the internet, seeing hundreds of videos saying MGS2 is a masterpiece, and decide that it can generate its own version of that and up. On May 12, 2023, Nintendo released The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. I still haven't forgiven them.
What did you say?
I don't like the Demon's Souls remake. I think that it's inferior to the original in every way other than graphics.
What's wrong with you?
This video's going out to all those bitch-ass marks, and mark-ass bitches, and trick-ass marks, and mark-ass tricks, and mark-ass marks that think they know what pizza is.
What are you talking about?
In the end, it may end up being the very AIs themselves creating and regulating their own junk data, and real people behind the screens might eventually become a minority, which would be a very ironic twist on the game's predictions. Something that I think is often overlooked when discussing how this sequence predicted the future is that the AI's framing is still one-sided. We are, in many respects, living in the future the Patriots predicted, but the speech itself is a half-truth, presented with the ideological slant that the Patriots must retain their power for the good of mankind. They're acting and speaking out of self-preservation, even if they want you to believe that they have your best interests in mind. They predicted that the internet would devolve into tribalism, that echo chambers would form in which dissenting opinions would be removed from participation, and that the net as a whole would be filled with unfiltered bullshit information, and all of that in one way or another has come to pass. If anything, it's worse because algorithms tend to favor engagement over anything else, so highly sensationalized stories can go absolutely hog wild. The alternative they propose is that they have the power to decide what the truth is and what information is valuable. But that will always come with a very obvious conflict of interest, which is that any information that is inconvenient to their own ideology and systems of power would also be at their mercy and would presumably be filtered out. While it's true that the internet contains a lot of garbage, there is also some very legitimate information as well. Specifically, the kinds of things that would probably get filtered out by traditional news stations. A major plot point in the game is how the Patriot-controlled news media recontextualized Snake and Otacon's motives in the Tanker chapter. Their plan was to infiltrate the Tanker to get photographic evidence of the new Metal Gear model, but a Cypher drone photographed Snake before Ocelot blows the Tanker sky high, and using that photo they created a context, a story, that Snake and Otacon were responsible. On the back of becoming heroes in Shadow Moses, the Patriots wanted to reframe them as maniacal terrorists so that they would lose the public's support and have a target on their backs. And with the internet tightly controlled as it is in the game, anyone who questions the narrative was likely filtered out of the digital town square, or themselves framed as a whack job conspiracy theorist. If this happened in real life today, I can only imagine there would be a whole movement of people questioning this narrative, almost reflexively, after so much mistrust has been sown. While news stations run headlines about the hero of Shadow Moses turned villain, the YouTubers and Twitch streamers who, for many young people, have replaced legacy media would be all over this like flies on shit. I don't want to suggest this is necessarily ideal or that some YouTuber will in all cases be more trustworthy than a CNN anchor, but in general, at least on paper, they tend to be unbound by the same forces and interests behind mainstream news, and the internet enables them to have a very wide reach that they didn't have before. I imagine that's what the Patriot AI was really concerned about, that people would be able to question their official truths. And in the real world, the official truths provided by governments and media institutions are being questioned more and more intensely than ever before. Therefore, I'm not shocked at all that they are pushing for the clamping down of social media websites, needing an ID to use your phone or digital IDs and biometrics, while swearing up and down that these things will actually make us safer. So, this is the crossroads. A. Online access and discourse remains largely free and open, even if it means driving many of us insane. Or B, The Illuminati Shadow Patriots control everything and filter exactly what we get to see, hiding anything they don't want us to know about. Both of these options, in one way or another, will probably end terribly. But let's take a step back. All the talk about the different ways the game predicted the future, intentionally or otherwise, tend to overshadow the game's actual message and full ending. In particular, Snake's advice to Raiden. Despite the aggressively dystopian flavor to what immediately precedes this moment, the ultimate takeaway is actually quite uplifting. Snake tells Raiden that he should find his own meaning and his own values. He should find something to believe in and pass it on to the future. The Patriots believe themselves to be the arbiters of truth, but Snake says there is no such thing as absolute reality. Most things are really some kind of fiction, only as real as your brain tells you it is. It's for you to figure out what to have faith in. This may well be more difficult to do in the digitized era than ever before. Our brains were not really meant to process this grotesque volume of information. But perhaps it's for that very reason that the message is so important. As Michael Saba puts it in his Phantom Pain video, to be free, to live a truly heroic life, you must find your own meaning outside of received wisdom and official truths. And as Raiden discards the dog tag with the player's name on it, literally breaking free of control, it's as though he is fully ready to do so.
I'll pick my own name and my own life. I'll find something worth passing on. They taught me some good things, too.
I know. We've inherited freedom from all those who fought for it. We all have the freedom to spread the word, even me.
Raiden reunites with Rose, and he finally realizes why April 30th is so important. It's the day he met Rose for the first time, but initially that meeting was a farce set up by the Patriots. Rose's entire identity was largely faked to suit Raiden's interest to gain his trust. Both of them were used by the system, but now they have a chance to really meet each other for the first time. The two of them get a new lease on life, and the story concludes on an open-ended note. It's not for us to know exactly what Raiden and Rose will pass on to the future. That will be their truth, and theirs alone. But it turns out this was the final test of the player, and as it happens, it's a test that the fans failed. Like Raiden, the fans were supposed to move on, find their own meaning. But the fans demanded closure. They demanded answers. They demanded official truths. They just had to know the real identity of the Patriots. And after years of sending death threats to Kojima, they were gonna get all the answers they asked for. Whether they were the answers they actually wanted or not.